Hello, I'm Mr. Wilde, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to make a decorative coil mug with a handle. The type of clay I'm using is a Laguna clay, WC 401 B Mix Cone 5. It's important to know which cone fire your clay is for firing later on, but this is the completed but unfired coil mug that I'll be making. On a side note, B-Mix Cone 5 clay is a great all-around clay, great for throwing on the wheel, and great for making hand-built projects. These are the equipment and tools I'll be using for this project, and I'll supply a link at the end of this video for all my tools. First off, a large chunk of B-Mix Cone 5 clay. The same B-Mix Cone 5 clay that I've already slabbed and cut into a circle. You can see it's nice and flat and ready to be a base. A needle tool, fettling knife, a wire clay cutter, a plastic 9-inch square Amico Plastibat, great for building projects on. And then just a plastic container for slip. Slip is just clay and water combined. And then a water bottle that I usually just keep on mist. Going to move a couple of things out of the way. And then I'm going to start with the base. I'm starting with the base, and I'm going to stamp and sign my name on the bottom of my preformed, pre-cut slab base. It's easier to do it now while the clay is still soft and in its plastic state. Traditionally, potters and ceramists have used stamps to identify their artwork, but as a teacher with as many students as I have each semester, there's no way I'm remembering every student's stamp, so I require their names as well. For impressing my name, I use the needle tool, but I don't hold it like I would a pencil, as it would just tear up the clay. But instead, I just lay the needle tool almost flat and drag the needle to create clean, straight lines that I'll form into letters. Nice, clean, no clay crumbs. Flip it upside down because I want my name and stamp on the bottom. Now I'm going to use the wire to cut off some of the clay. If your clay is still in the plastic stage, the wire will cut through the clay almost effortlessly. If anybody's watching, they'll be like, "Oh, that's so satisfying to watch." Then I'll cut that piece into a couple smaller pieces. Then for the clay that I'm not using immediately, I'll put it in a sealed bag to keep it from drying out. I usually just use a larger bag, and I'll just kind of twist it shut and fold it underneath, fold the opening underneath, and let the weight of the clay keep it closed. But for this project, I'm just using a Ziploc bag to keep my clay in, just to keep it moist. To get ready to roll the clay into a coil, I'm squeezing and pinching the clay into a cylinder with a pointed or rounded end. These pointed or rounded ends keep the clay from developing air pockets as you roll out the very ends of the clay. Okay, once that clay kind of starts getting long or longer and you're rolling it out, you form these awful little air pockets in them. But sometimes I'll twist the clay just a little bit and then I'll start rolling. When rolling coils, start at your fingertips and roll to the base of your palms. The reason you want longer rolls is that the more times the coil rotates forward in the same direction, the better chance the coil's going to stay round. I start with one hand and move to two hands if necessary. My hands should also be moving slowly from side to side, up and down the coil. The coil should be consistently the same thickness, so feel the clay and watch the clay. I like my coils to be about pinky finger thickness, or maybe a little smaller. So if you have extremely massive hands, probably go with a little bit smaller than pinky finger thickness. And then I will just continue to roll and make sure those coils are just nice and even. So I'm setting this coil aside. I'm going to spray it with just a little bit of water. Again, just kind of a mist, and just to make sure it doesn't dry out. With this next chunk of clay, I'm cutting out 3 small slabs, all about the same size. And I'm shaping these into triangular slabs just by pinching and tapping. You'll notice that I'm putting down a paper towel underneath the clay. Anytime I work with slab, I like to have either a cloth or paper barrier between the clay and table. Because of the moisture in the clay, it'll stick to the table, and then sometimes I've ruined slabs trying to pull them up from the table. These slabs are going to be at the base of my mug, and their main purpose will be to break up the pure horizontal nature of laying coils and to also create visual movement. If this is your first attempt at coil building, feel free to omit these slabs and just start with making coils. I'm also rolling the corners to round them a little bit, as it'll be easier to lay coils atop a rounded form as opposed to a sharp angled corner. I'm also using the handle. You'll see here in a minute, I'm going to use the handle of the wire tool to create small rounded grooves that'll make it easier for the coils to fit into. Not that they're necessarily going to fit into those grooves, but those grooves are just going to help with the placement of the coils. Now 2 of them are going to be sitting flat on the base, so I only have to do 2 of the 3 sides. But the third triangle, I'm actually going to indent all 3 sides. You'll see why when I start stacking my coils. But the other thing I'm going to do is I'm drawing a triangle on the 3rd slab, which I'm going to use for the lower part of the handle when I attach the handle later. But for right now, just kind of know that I'm doing that. I'm bringing in the base that's still on the plastibat, and I'm arranging the slabs where they're going to sit on the slab base. Again, the name and the stamp are down underneath. But I'm taking the needle tool and I'm actually drawing an outline of where those 2 pieces are going to go. To attach the triangular slabs, I'm scoring the clay. Those score marks, they're not just for looks. You actually need to gouge the clay, as scoring is going to help create the grab that is needed to keep those different pieces together. If you do not score, your projects will fall apart. After I've scored the pieces with my needle tool, I'm now adding some slip. Slip is a clay-water mixture that acts like glue for clay. I tend to use an excess of slip. I like using the extra slip. Number one, it makes sure that slip gets squished up into all those scored areas. And it's always easier to go back and remove the excess slip than it is to, after it dries, go back and add more slip, which usually doesn't work. So now I got it scored and slipped. I'll set those pieces in place. So again, my third triangle slab is actually going to sit on the first coil. It's going to be spaced out like the other two. But before I add that third triangular slab, I'm going to start my first coil. I'm doing this to raise the level of where the bottom of my handle will be. I'm cutting the starting end of the first coil at a shallow angle. The reason for this is that when the next section of coil comes around and lays on top of it, it'll be easier to lay that next coil. But I'm laying that first section of coil. Use my fettling knife to smooth it out a little bit. Now that I have that first section of that first coil in place, I'm going to impress that third triangular slab just a little bit more, and then I'm going to set it in the right spot, and then I'm going to continue laying the rest of that first coil. I am attempting to be very precise with that coil. I want to lay it directly on top of the coil right beneath it. With that first coil on, I go back to the start of the coil and gently start pinching the coils, not to distort their shape, but to make sure the coils are stacked precisely on top of each other. One of the key grading criteria for this project is how precisely and how deliberately coils are stacked. Now I'm adding slip to the inside of my coil mug. Fingers are the best tool for this, as fingers are soft and rounded and they won't gouge the clay. I'm adding slip into all the cracks, especially between the base and the first coil. The base and the body of my coil mug will completely separate if I don't get slip between those two areas. As I'm slipping, I go around and around as many times as needed to ensure all cracks are filled with slip and all excess clay is removed. Sometimes I may use a tool to help apply the slip. Sometimes there's different tools that I'll even use to smooth out the slip. But again, the finger, your hands, usually the best things for smoothing out that slip. As you get this part finished, it's okay to see the bumps created by the coils, but pay particular attention between the base and the first coil. There's no cracks. We don't see any cracks there, right? We have to get slip in those areas to make sure the base and the coils stick together. I'm rolling out coils as long as I can make them, but keeping them the same thickness. Where the last coil ends, when I go to stack the next one, that's where I'll begin the next one. I just butt them up just end to end. And I slip every couple of coils or every couple of inches. But I slip as I go along. One of the last things you want to do is stack all of your coils and then go back and try to add the slip afterwards. Oftentimes, parts of the clay dries out and that slip doesn't attach well, or it doesn't bind those coils together. But again, as you're looking, I'm just adding slip. Because the clay is soft, oftentimes I'll have my other hand behind it to help support it. The next coils I'm rolling are going to be for the braided handle. Even though I still have most of the body of the mug to build, I want to get the handle built so that it'll have time to get leather hard before I have to attach it. If the clay is leather hard, it'll hold its form by itself. I'm careful as I'm braiding the handle, as I want to avoid squishing the coils or breaking them, but I do want them fairly tight together, as they'll act more like one thick coil as opposed to 3 weaker coils. As I work my way to the end, I'm going to get to a stopping point. Just going to line the coils up nicely, and then I'm going to slice them apart. Just going to cut them. Just going to make sure the coils are just in the nice place how I want them. Form the end just a little bit, and then I'll actually I'll set it on its side and curve it while it's still in its plastic form. All right, I'm rolling 3 or 4 coils in a row and occasionally spraying them with water, as I don't want them to dry out. With 3 or 4 coils done, I stack them up to a desired height very deliberately and very precisely, then go through the gentle pinching technique to guarantee the coils are stacked directly on top of their previous coils. Once I know coils are right where I want them to be, I start slipping them. Notice again, smooth on the inside. You can see some of the bumps as created by the coils, but no cracks, no lines. I'll focus on the exterior surface more towards the end of the project. But I'm bagging up the project for the night. I'm going to put the mug and the handle together in the same bag. This helps to ensure the moisture quality stays consistent for both pieces. I'll just fold the bag over, tuck it underneath, and let the weight of the clay keep the bag closed. All right, it's been 3 or 4 days since I started the coil mug. The clay is closer to leather hard, which is good because it'll be able to withstand any more coils that I stack on top of it or anything else that I do to it. So by starting with 3 triangles at the base, I now have 3 dips in the clay, or 3 dips at the rim. And anyone who's ever tried to drink out of a container with an uneven rim knows how messy it can be. So I'm going to be making 3 more slabs that resemble inverted speed bumps that'll fit into the dips. So I'll make the 3 slabs, I'll set them into place, and then that will allow me to add 1 more round coil that'll go over the top and just kind of finish everything off and hold everything in place. but I'll form all 3 slabs. And I'll just set them there for now. Just set them in place. Here goes number 2. Then there's the 3rd one. Again, just kind of hold it in place. I'm measuring the handle to make sure that the height looks correct or where it's supposed to be. And now I'm rolling the final coil. Since it's the last one, I want it absolutely perfect. It'll be the one that anybody who drinks out of the mug, that'll be the coil they focus on. The little slabs, I'm scoring the top of the coil, scoring the bottom of the slab where the pieces are going to attach. I'm adding slip. Add slip to the easier piece, right? It's easier for me to move that little slab around. So I add the slip to the slab, set the slab in place, and just do a little bit of a cleanup. I'll go in and hit it later with slip, the final interior slipping and smoothing. And again for the second one, score both pieces. Slip it, add it on, smooth it out. Same thing, score, slip, and smooth. The magical method that attaches 2 pieces of clay together. Score, slip, and smooth. All right, I got it attached, cleaned it up just a little bit. Doing a little bit of slipping on the inside where I saw a couple little blemishes, a couple little problems. So just make a little mark, just a little halfway mark. I'm going to start that last coil. It's going to wrap around. I'm going to mark it. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to score the ends of those coils just a little bit. Normally I don't, but for this one I do. It's the final coil. I want to make it nice and neat. Again, I pinch just to make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. Smooth some things over. And again, before I add the handle, right, I go in there, score the inside. For the next step, I want to wait until my coils are all definitely leather hard. And I'm sponging a little bit of the outside surface of the mug with a slightly damp sponge. The reason I do this, it eliminates blemishes. There's always little blemishes on the outside of your mug, and this is a great way to eliminate those. It eliminates cracks in the clay. Sometimes you get cracks from rolling coils that are more vertical in nature, usually due to the fact that the clay is dried out a little bit. But I'm also talking about the horizontal cracks between the coils. And then it also helps the coils look more uniform in shape. Again, because that sponge leaves such a nice surface, sometimes I will go in and sponge the interior as well. And right now I'm just kind of in cleanup mode, just kind of finishing mode, giving the project a good finished look. I want it to look sharp. I want it to look clean. I want people to want to drink out of it, right? And basically what happens with sponging the outside surface of the coil mug is this. Water from the sponge combines with clay from your project to form slip inside your sponge. And sometimes you need to add a couple drops of water to activate that. But it's useful. All right, so now I'm just cutting a little bit of the handle off. I want to make sure it's just the right size. I'll get to the right side of the mug where the handle's going to attach. Measure it. Looks good. Now I'm going to take a mini ribbon tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to carve just the bottom of the handle, because the top of the mug is rounded. I want it to fit that way. All right, so now you're looking at the triangle, the third base triangle, and what I'm doing is I am carving out an indentation that handle is going to fit into. Think of the ball joint of your femur, and think about how it fits into the socket in your pelvis, as opposed to just resting flush against the outside of the the hip or whatever, right? And in the same way, that bottom part of the mug, it's going to fit better, right? If it has a little socket, a little pocket for it to fit into. And then I'm going to go ahead and score that right now. Again, I'm going to measure it and fit it. I want to make sure it fits well. I'm going to score the top rim of the mug where that handle is going to attach. I'm going to slip the areas of the handle now where they're going to attach to the mug. I've done enough of these to know that you really want the handle to fit well. All right, so then I'm going to take the slip. I'm going to slip the top rim of the mug, and then I'm going to take some slip, and I'm actually going to fill up the little indentation with slip. Just going to fill it full of slip. If there's any excess, it'll squish out, and I can clean it up later. But again, I want to make sure there's enough slip. So I'll set it inside. I'll set the top piece on, make sure it attaches well. Make sure it fits well. Just going to hold it in place while I grab the sponge. I'm setting the sponge underneath the handle to hold it in place. Now the design of the handle works in a really good way. The top part of the handle is sitting on top of the rim, and the bottom part of the handle is in that little indentation, that little socket. And so by just setting the sponge there, it frees up my hands where I don't have to hold that handle in place. Then what I'm able to do is go in there and add more slip where some slip is needed, fill in any little cracks, do any kind of fix-it work, right? I'm very careful around the handle, right? Since I barely put it on, it wouldn't take much to bump it off. But now it's back to sponging. And as much sponging as I like to do, I still love to see those exterior coils. I think the coil method is beautiful. And so yeah, I love seeing the coils when I make a coil project. On the inside, if I start losing the coils, that's fine, because again, we got to get the slip between those coils. That is how your project stays together. If you do not slip those interior coils, your project will fall apart. I'm focusing a bit on the handle now, adding minimal amounts of slip to help the strands of the braid stick together better. Okay, so too much water or too much slip, and it can have a negative effect by dissolving part of the handle or dissolving the handle. But if you're using just minimal amounts of clay on the handle to fill in some of the little cracks, it'll just help those different strands bind together better. So again, I'm just super careful about the amount of slip that I'm adding. All right, one last thing about the handle. If you pick your mug up by the handle, it will break. If you want to be able to pick your mug up by the handle, you got to bring it into me and let me fire it first. Otherwise, it'll break. Set it down ever so gently. The final result, visible coils, but smooth with blemishes sponged out. Coils stacked deliberately and precisely. Coils are all the same size. The handle attached almost seamlessly. Inside cracks completely filled in with slip. And signed. And that's it. That's your coil mug.